It is just after dusk in Asheville, North Carolina, and the last streaks of sunlight are fading behind the Blue Ridge Mountains. The gates of Riverside Cemetery stand half open, their ironwork damp with mountain mist. Inside, 87 acres of graves and winding stone paths wait in the dark. This place has been part of Asheville since 1885, and it holds more than 13,000 burials. Famous writers like Thomas Wolfe and O. Henry rest here, but it is not only the famous who draw visitors. Locals have whispered for more than a century that the dead at Riverside do not always stay quiet. The cemetery sits on a gentle hillside above the French Broad River. Old oaks and maples lean over narrow lanes, their branches weaving together to create deep pockets of shadow. By day it is peaceful, a place for history tours and quiet reflection. At night it changes. People speak of a sudden drop in temperature as they pass the oldest section, as if a door to another world has opened just for a moment. Some say they hear footsteps on gravel when no one is near. Others describe the faint smell of fresh earth where no new graves have been dug. One of the most repeated stories concerns a figure known only as the Woman in White. Visitors have reported seeing her standing near a child's grave that bears only initials and a date from the 1890s. The story first surfaced in newspaper letters more than 70 years ago, when a caretaker wrote that he watched a woman kneeling in the moonlight and weeping, her dress glowing faintly against the dark. When he approached, she vanished. Decades later, a local college student claimed almost the same encounter while walking with friends after midnight. She described the woman's face as kind but unbearably sad, and said the air turned icy enough that her breath hung like smoke. Guides who lead Riverside's official history walks often speak of their own uneasy moments. One longtime guide tells of locking the gates at closing and hearing the heavy clang of iron behind him though no one else was inside. Another recalls the echo of a soft hymn as if from a distant church service, drifting across the graves when every nearby chapel was long closed. These accounts appear again and again in tour logs and local message boards. No single witness claims proof, but the pattern is hard to ignore. The famous graves lend another layer of mystery. Thomas Wolfe, author of Look Homeward, Angel, is buried here with his family. Some visitors insist they have heard the sound of a typewriter coming from the direction of his monument, a rhythmic tapping that fades the closer you walk. O. Henry, the master of twist endings, lies a short distance away. More than one late-night photographer has reported a faint, almost playful laugh while adjusting camera settings near his headstone, only to find the grounds empty when they turned. Residents of Asheville often speak of a particular cold that settles over Riverside in the small hours before dawn. Meteorologists say the cemetery's location near the river creates natural pockets of fog and chilled air. Yet witnesses describe a sudden, sharp cold that cuts through even summer heat. A local historian once said it felt as though the dead exhaled all at once. Couples who come for the eerie beauty sometimes leave in a hurry when that cold air arrives, claiming it brings a sense of being watched. Not all encounters are frightening. Some visitors feel an unexpected calm, even a gentle presence. A widower from Charlotte told the Citizen Times that he visited the grave of a long-lost aunt and heard a quiet voice humming an old Appalachian lullaby. He stood completely still, certain he was alone, and listened until the sound faded. He described it not as a scare but as a moment of comfort, as if the past reached forward to pat me on the shoulder. The cemetery's caretakers remain practical. They acknowledge that Riverside's dense trees, river fog, and layers of history can play tricks on the senses. Echoes carry strangely. Moonlight bends through the branches. Yet even they admit there are nights when the atmosphere changes without explanation. One groundskeeper who worked there for 20 years said that, on rare occasions, the birds fall silent and the place feels awake in a different way, like it's listening to you. Local folklore ties some of the mystery to the land itself. Before the cemetery, this hillside was part of a Cherokee hunting ground. Artifacts have been found in the soil, arrowheads, fragments of pottery, suggesting centuries of life and death before European settlers arrived. Some believe those earlier spirits mingle with the newer graves, creating layers of memory that surface when conditions are right. Whether one believes in spirits or not, the idea adds depth to every crunch of gravel beneath a visitor's feet. People who come after dark often talk about the sound of footsteps that match their own. A pair of hikers once described walking the central path and hearing a second set of steps just behind them. When they stopped, the sound stopped. When they walked again, the footsteps returned, perfectly in rhythm. They turned quickly with flashlights but saw only the long stretch of empty road. Their story joined dozens of similar accounts recorded in local forums and ghost walk reviews. Despite these reports, Riverside is not a place of terror. It is a working cemetery, lovingly maintained, where families still gather to honor their dead. That balance between peaceful remembrance and unexplained phenomena is what draws so many visitors. People come seeking history and often leave with a story they cannot quite explain. Imagine standing there yourself, the moon just clearing the ridge. The iron gates are a silhouette against the sky. The river carries a low murmur from somewhere beyond the trees. A sudden cool breeze stirs the leaves, and for a moment you think you hear a faint hymn carried on the air. You shine a light toward the sound, but the path is empty. Only the old stones remain, their carved names soft with age. Whether it was wind, echo, or something older than the city itself, you cannot say. But you will remember it. The people of Asheville continue to share these experiences, not as tall tales meant to frighten, but as moments that remind them the past is never entirely gone. Riverside Cemetery stands as a bridge between history and mystery, where the boundary between the living and the dead sometimes feels thinner than the night air. Visitors arrive expecting quiet history and leave with stories that linger long after they step back into the modern streets of the city. So if you ever find yourself in Asheville after sunset, and you feel the urge to walk among the graves of Riverside, know that you may encounter more than stone and silence. Whether it is the woman in white, the echo of a typewriter, or simply the weight of centuries pressing gently against the present, the experience is unforgettable. And when you leave, you may glance back through the gates and wonder if someone, or something, watches you disappear into the dark. It's easy to miss Tilly Bend Church if you're not looking for it. A narrow gravel road winds through the Blue Ridge Mountains of northern Georgia, and when the trees finally thin, you see a small white clapboard church standing on a hill. The building is plain, almost gentle in daylight, but the ground around it tells a different story. Leaning headstones jut from the soil like crooked teeth. The air seems heavier here even in summer. Locals call this place Tilly Bend Church Cemetery, and they will warn you, sometimes with a nervous laugh, that after dark the hill is alive with the dead. The legend begins in the early 1800s, when two mountain families, the Morgans and the Tillis, settled opposite sides of the Toccoa River. At first they shared the wilderness with cautious respect. But the quiet valleys of these mountains can hold grudges the way they hold fog. A feud broke out. No one remembers the first insult. Some say it was a dispute over land boundaries. Others whisper about a forbidden romance. What is remembered are the killings. In the dead of one winter, Morgan men rode up to the Tilly homestead. Shots shattered the silence. Several Tillis were left bleeding in the snow. Days later, the Tilly men struck back. Each family buried its dead on the hill by the little church. Old records confirm the deaths, though the details are lost to rumor and dust. It might have ended there, just another Appalachian tragedy, but the stories say the feud spilled into the spirit world. Worshippers began hearing footsteps on the church porch when no one stood outside. Doors slammed during sermons. Lanterns flickered, though there was no wind. One name surfaces again and again, a woman called Mary Tilly. Some versions call her a healer, others a witch. She was said to be pregnant when a Morgan bullet struck her. Heartbroken and furious, she cursed both families with her dying breath. They buried her at the edge of the cemetery, near the tree line where the shadows stay long even at noon. More than a century later, visitors claim Mary has never rested. Listen to the accounts gathered by hikers and paranormal investigators. A local schoolteacher out for an evening walk swore she heard a woman's low moan rising from the ground itself. A group of amateur ghost hunters left audio recorders running beside Mary's unmarked grave. The playback captured a voice, soft but distinct, whispering their names. Others talk about the wind. On calm nights it can build from nothing, rushing through the cemetery with a sound like distant wailing. One witness described it as a scream that belongs to the earth. They said the trees bent toward the graves as if drawn to the sound. Perhaps the most chilling story came from a young couple who hiked up after midnight, armed with flashlights and bravado. They reported seeing a figure standing beneath the old oak near the church, a woman in a long dress, head tilted as if listening. When the man called out, the figure turned. Her eyes, he said, glowed faintly like lantern embers. The woman reached for her phone to snap a picture, but the screen went black. Their flashlights flickered. And then the figure was gone. Skeptics will say it's just mountain fog and imagination. But those who've walked the hill at night describe something harder to dismiss. A physical weight, a sense of being watched. The gravel crunches differently underfoot. The air smells of damp iron like blood in cold water. If you visit in daylight, the place almost looks peaceful. The church still hosts services once a month. Sunlight spills over the pews. Yet even then, people say the shadows feel too deep. Photographs sometimes show pale streaks of light, like thin arms reaching across the stones. One hiker from Atlanta wrote in an online forum that he tried to take a shortcut through the woods behind the cemetery. His compass spun in slow circles. He walked for what felt like hours before he stumbled back onto the same gravel road where he'd started. Locals nodded when he told the story. That hill keeps who it wants, an old man told him. There are, of course, rational explanations. Temperature drops can create pockets of mist. Old oak branches creak in the wind. A trick of moonlight can turn moss into glowing shapes. But none of that explains the voice recordings, the names whispered in the dark, or why cameras fail exactly when a figure appears. Some believers say the feud is to blame, that the violent deaths, the grief, and Mary Tilly's final curse left a wound in the land itself. Others claim the church was built on a Native American burial ground, and the spirits were never properly honored. Historians point out that Cherokee trails did cross this region long before settlers arrived. No one can say for sure. Tonight, if you were to drive that gravel road, you'd find the same lonely church standing watch on its hill. You might step out of your car and feel nothing at first. Then, as the crickets fall silent, you might notice how the dark seems to press closer, how the breeze carries a faint sound, something like a woman's sigh. You might tell yourself it's only the wind. But if you listen carefully, you may hear footsteps circling the church. You may smell what smoke that isn't there. And if you linger too long by the tree line where Mary Tilly sleeps, you might sense her eyes upon you, waiting for the feud to finally end. People still gather here on certain nights, hoping to glimpse the unexplained. They come with cameras, recorders, and steady nerves. Some leave with nothing more than a chill. Others drive away pale and silent, unwilling to speak about what they felt. Tilly Bend Church Cemetery remains, a quiet witness to an old Appalachian blood feud and, perhaps, to something that refuses to die. The Greenbrier Valley lies deep in the rolling hills of southern West Virginia. At night the mountains fold into shadow, and the sky feels so close you'd swear you could touch the stars. People here are used to long winters and lonely roads, but one grave along a quiet bend of the Meadow River carries a warning. May God grant her eternal rest. Murdered by her husband. It's the only known case in American history where the testimony of a ghost helped secure a murder conviction. Locals still call her the Greenbrier Ghost. Her name was Zona Hester Shue. She was just 23 when she married a blacksmith named Erasmus, known to everyone as Edward Shue, in 1896. To neighbors he seemed charming, strong, a man with calloused hands and quick laughter. Zona's mother, Mary Jane Hester, was less convinced. Something about the blacksmith's eyes set her on edge. But Zona, in love and stubborn, moved with Edward into a small house on the edge of town. That winter was bitter. Snow fell so thick it muffled the sound of wagon wheels. One gray January afternoon, a neighbor boy found Zona lying at the foot of the stairs, her body oddly arranged as if placed there. Edward wept dramatically, refusing to let the county doctor examine her. He claimed she'd collapsed from everlasting faint. The doctor, uneasy but cowed by Edward's grief, signed the death certificate as natural causes. Zona was buried quickly in the soil of Little Sewell Mountain. Mary Jane Hester was not at peace. She said later that from the moment the coffin closed she felt a pull, as if her daughter were calling from the dark. She prayed nightly, begging God to let her know the truth. And then the dreams began. Four nights in a row, Zona appeared at the foot of her mother's bed. Not hazy or dreamlike, Mary Jane swore it was as real as daylight. Zona wore the dress she had died in, the bruised marks of fingers still visible on her pale throat. In a voice both soft and sharp, she told her mother the story of her death. Edward, she said, had a violent temper. On the night she died, he flew into a rage because dinner wasn't ready. He seized her by the neck and broke it at the first joint. Then he posed her body at the bottom of the stairs to look like an accident. Each night the apparition returned, turning her head a full circle to prove the neck had been broken. Mary Jane went to the local prosecutor, John Alfred Preston, a practical man not known for chasing ghosts. But her quiet certainty, and the fact that Edward had been strangely possessive of the corpse, nagged at him. He ordered the body exhumed. The autopsy told the same story the ghost had. Zona's neck was broken. The evidence pointed directly to Edward's shoe. In March of 1897 he was arrested and brought to trial. The courthouse transcripts still exist. Witnesses described Edward's unpredictable rages and his suspicious insistence that no one touched the body. The defense tried to mock Mary Jane's visions, but her testimony was calm, unwavering. "I am not dreaming," she told the court. "My daughter came back to me." The jury deliberated for just over an hour before finding Edward guilty of murder. He died in the state penitentiary 3 years later. More than a century has passed, yet people say the Greenbrier ghost never left. Visitors to the small cemetery outside the town of Raynell talk of cold pockets of air even on warm summer evenings. Photographers capture strange misty forms around Zona's stone, a pale figure that blurs the lens. Some swear they hear the faint creak of a rocking chair or the whisper of a woman's voice when no one else is near. Local historian Kathy Miller, who leads night tours, tells of a traveler who set his phone to record near the grave. Playback revealed a single whispered word, "Mama." Another guest reported the smell of wild roses, Zona's favorite, drifting through the air though no flowers grew nearby. Skeptics argue it's just the power of suggestion. The mind plays tricks in a dark mountain cemetery. But others believe Zona keeps watch, ensuring her story is never forgotten. After all, it was her persistence, from beyond death, that brought a murderer to justice. Stand by her headstone today and you'll read the inscription her mother chose. She was murdered by her husband. In the Greenbrier County Court he was convicted on the evidence of the ghost of his wife. When the wind sweeps down the valley and rattles the dry oak leaves, locals say it sounds like a woman's soft laugh. Some nights, a faint lantern glow drifts between the stones, moving as if carried by invisible hands. Maybe it's only moonlight on the mist. Or maybe Zona Hester Shue still walks the mountain nights, a reminder that even in death, a mother's prayer can call the truth into the light. Knoxville, Tennessee, wears its past like layers of old brick. Streets wind past Civil War forts, 19th century mansions, and the slow bend of the Tennessee River. At the heart of the city lies a quiet, 13-acre stretch of stone and grass known as Old Gray Cemetery. By day it feels like a Victorian park, towering oaks, carved angels, and elegant mausoleums built in the 1850s. But when the sun slips behind the Smoky Mountains, Old Gray changes. Locals whisper that the dead here still keep watch. The first burials came during a cholera outbreak in 1852. Knoxville was a rough railroad town, and disease moved fast through the crowded streets. Entire families were carried to the hill for burial. During the Civil War the cemetery became a resting place for soldiers from both the Union and the Confederacy, sometimes laid only feet apart. Blood feuds, duels, and industrial accidents added their dead to the soil. More than a century and a half later, the ground holds over 10,000 graves. Caretakers have long reported strange happenings. Lanterns gutter without wind. Pathways grow misty even in summer heat. One night in the 1930s, a groundskeeper claimed he saw a blue glow hovering near the obelisk of a Confederate general. When he approached, the light vanished, leaving only the smell of gunpowder. Modern visitors tell similar tales. Photographers setting up long exposures describe orbs of pale light weaving through their frames, unexplained streaks that no camera setting can erase. Paranormal groups record EVPs, electronic voices, where a low male whisper answers questions with single words, "Here," "Cold," "Stay." Perhaps the most chilling stories center on the woman in the veil. She is said to appear near the grand marble mausoleum of the Baker family, her face hidden beneath a dark mourning veil. Witnesses describe a figure so solid they mistake her for a living visitor, until she fades like smoke when approached. One college student swore the figure turned toward him, revealing empty blackness where a face should be. His camera, fully charged minutes earlier, died the instant he tried to snap a photo. Another legend tells of train whistles in the night, though the old rail line nearby has been silent for decades. Hikers walking the perimeter trail sometimes hear the long, lonesome call of a steam engine, followed by the clank of iron wheels. Some say it's the ghost of a conductor buried here after a fatal derailment in 1904. Others believe it's the spirits of soldiers returning to a city that never welcomed them home. Skeptics offer explanations: streetlights reflecting through fog, temperature shifts, overactive imaginations. Yet even hardened historians admit Old Gray carries an unusual heaviness. The Knoxville History Project, which documents the site, notes that visitors often report an inexplicable feeling of being watched, especially near the oldest sections where headstones tilt like weary sentinels. A local historian once locked the gates at dusk only to hear footsteps behind him, measured, deliberate, when he was certain the grounds were empty. He searched every path with a flashlight. Nothing. As he reached the exit, a cold breath brushed his ear and a voice whispered a single word: "Wait." There are dozens of such accounts. Couples finding their watches stopped at precisely the same minute. Tourists who swear they smelled wood smoke and blood after kneeling to read a soldier's name. Children pointing at empty air and greeting someone unseen. Perhaps the most unsettling incident came in the winter of 2011. A photographer conducting a night shoot reported a figure stepping from behind a crypt, tall, thin, wearing a long Civil War coat. Thinking it was a reenactor, the photographer called out. The figure lifted a hand in salute and simply dissolved. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, Old Gray's atmosphere is undeniable. The stones themselves tell of Knoxville's turbulent past: yellow fever victims, duelists, and soldiers who never made it home. Every gust of wind through the trees feels like a sigh from those restless decades. If you ever visit, you'll find the gates open during the day, the pathways lined with ancient cedars. Walk past the angel statues streaked with rain. Listen to the silence settle around you. You may hear only birds and distant traffic. Or you may feel the ground grow colder beneath your feet, as though the city's long history has decided you should stay a little longer. And when you leave, remember to glance over your shoulder. Many who don't swear they glimpse the woman in the veil watching from the shadows, her dark silhouette framed against the marble stones. Old Gray Cemetery isn't just Knoxville's history written in granite, it's a place where that history still breathes. Whether you call it ghosts, energy, or memory, something lingers among those graves waiting for nightfall. That's the story. If you're drawn to the mysteries of the Appalachians, if you want more true encounters with the haunted past, subscribe now and join me for the next journey into darkness. The mountains are full of stories and the dead are never really silent.